Hi, and welcome to our linguistic journey through learning and acquiring English language. Welcome to the Lingomaniac Lessons, a corner for language learning and usage means, tips, and tricks. The Lingomaniac Lessons, for nerds, by nerds. I'm Jelena, and I'm a master of philology, and I have been a teacher for almost 20 years, a teacher of English, French, Spanish, and Serbian. And I have been also a translator for almost 20 years of majority of these languages, plus additionally Italian.
Say plush. Sorry.
At the beginning in this video, I would like to, before we dive deep and deeper into the structure of English words and parts and basically the language itself. In this video, I would like to just go through a certain terminology, some field terms that I will be using throughout all of these videos. Now, I don't want to shower you with some expressions, well, basically with majority of expressions, which you'll never be using in your life unless you decide that your future calling will be, linguistics. In that case, feel free to ask for more. But I will just be using some maybe 10 to 15, basically determined, terms throughout this entire journey. Why? Because it will just help us reduce all of those unnecessary words and phrases that we would constantly be obliged to use while explaining things. It's basically like a name, instead of addressing people, hey you, with big ears and crooked nose, you just say, hey Tom, or Jerry, or Martha, whatever. So we'll just be, referring to those things by their name. But before we actually start going deeper, I would like us to explain those names and what those names are actually used for. What is it that they represent? I will be focusing on basically the name of each of those terms and the origin of the name, because that can also actually help us understand what the word is used for, what is its function, and also see how basically some other languages also had influenced the development of the modern English language that we know today. So when we are to discuss the origin of the names, we will be referring to some 5 different categories which had basically the influence on the English how we know it today. First and foremost, the influence of the ancient Greek language, which is basically deemed to be in use since 1500 before Christ to some 300 before Christ. So it was, a long time before the Christ, before the new era as we count it today. Among you who are watching, please, add up all the things that you think might be a valid or a good suggestion or correction, because I'm not a language historian. I'm just pointing out some of the general information that I have and that I obtained. But please feel free to correct or add or additionally explain in the comments if you feel like nerding a bit. So the ancient Greek, which is basically the basis for a lot of the languages that we know today, that are being used today. So the period, somewhere estimated period from 1500 to 300 before Christ. Of course, the second one, which basically somewhere derived from it, was the Latin language. which has been in the usage from the 7th century before Christ to the 18th century of our new age, so basically after Domini, after Christ. And in between, there have been, so majority of these field terms are in English language are basically used from Latin. And of course, in between that period, we have influences by Anglo-Norman language, or actually as it was called in the Old French, and of course Old French, Anglo-Norman, which were the Norman tribes, which basically came to the Anglo world, the English area, and influenced the language with their own language. So Anglo-Norman and Old French influence. And of course, those were Anglo-Norman influence was between 12th and 15th century, and influence from the Old French, which was basically spoken in the northern part of France, I mean of today's France, was somewhere between the 8th and 14th century of course, new era after Christ. And the influence of Middle English. Middle English is relatively specific because it was sort of like a transition period from the Old English to the modern English as we more or less know today, and which is more or less used even today. And that Middle English period lasted for around 300 years, somewhere between 1150 and 1450. But as I said, if there are historians amongst you, please feel free to correct, to supplement, to add whatever you would like or deem necessary or important in the comments, because it's never enough of nerding. Let's move on to why we have gathered here today, and those are basically going through the origin of these of the names of these terms that I will be using to just make your life simpler and make this linguistic journey simpler and easier. The first word that I would like to mention is the word noun. Now, it originates, as I said, everything basically originates from the ancient Greek period, and I've just had a few lessons of Greek in my learning period, and I apologize in advance because Greek is definitely nowhere close to my expertise, except those few lessons that I've had so far in my life, and a bit of alphabet learning for my physics lessons, science lessons, and application in those situations. So I apologize in advance for possibly, and in some situations probably, butchering some of the words. But Greek is definitely something that is out of my linguistic field, at least has been so far. We will see about the future, who knows. In the clips from the whiteboard, you will also see that I also try to present the words in their original, in the written form in the Greek. I also apologize if I made certain mistakes. I know that N is is a relatively problematic letter for me when writing it in Greek, but I hope that for those of you who are familiar with it, that you will find strength to forgive me. So let's move on. So nouns, they originate from basically the name of the word noun, originates from the ancient Greek expression word onoma, which meant name. It had the meaning name. Of course, the Latin word for the name is nomen. And the Anglo-Norman and French had different kinds of variants of this word. For example, noun, nom, non, and of course French would be non. And in the Middle English variant, which was that transition period, it basically crystallized, into the word noun as we know today. Of course, nouns are words which present and represent names of a specific object or a specific set of objects, basically item or set of items. It doesn't have to necessarily be just a physical object, because we can also be talking about persons or living creatures. So let's just say of a specific item or set of items. More on the nouns you will be able to watch in one of the following videos here in Lingomaniac Lectures, in the video Nouns, specifically about that part of speech. Next term would be adjective. Adjective is derived, actually originates from the Greek word epithetikon, which means added. So something which is added. And of course, the Latin version of the word derived, which basically is the closest one to the English one, is adjectivum, which is made from two different parts. The preposition ad, which means to, and the verb iacere, which means to throw. So basically something which is thrown to someone or something else. In Old French, the term was adjective, and of course in Middle English, it was used in that form, adjective, and adjective as we know today. Of course, the function of the adjectives, the reason why they exist, is to describe or modify nouns or phrases. So they're basically thrown to, they're added to the nouns or noun phrases and give additional description or some kind of modification. Again, additional information on Lingomaniac Lessons in the video on adjectives. Next term is numbers. Numbers originates from the ancient Greek word arithmos, and well, basically from that word you've got the expression arithmetics, which is a part of mathematics, which basically deals with the numbers. Arithmos has the meaning of the word number. In Latin, it was marked with the word numerus, which then in Old French and Anglo-Norman variant was used as the word in Anglo-Norman nombre, and in Old French nombre. And that one actually existed in several different forms in Middle English. So in Middle English you could have basically used 4 different forms. Number as we know it today, then nombre, which was close to it, nombre, and nombre. Basically the ones from Old French and the Anglo-Norman period of time. But it also got clarified to the word of number, which is in today's modern usage. Of course, numbers are numerals. Those are words that describe some numerical quantity. Next expression, next word is article. Now, in Old Greek, article is derived from the word arthmos, which is basically very similar to the previous one that we mentioned, arithmos. So this one is arthmos. it has lost that I, that E in between. And arthmos means to be put together. So the one which is put together. In Latin, the word is articulus. And of course, in French, Old French, the word which was being used was article. And articulus, article, that influenced the Middle English into the today's expression article, which basically means what? The one that indicates or specifies and limits nouns or noun phrases and usually joins them into a meaningful whole. The next expression, actually the next word, would be a pronoun. Now, a pronoun is derived from the Greek word antonomia, and that basically goes from ante and numia, which is from onoma, which is derived from the word onoma, from the word name. And in Latin, the form is pronomen, which is made from two different words, pro and nomen. Pro means instead of, for. And nomen is, of course, the name which we already mentioned when I was talking about nouns. So the pronomen would definitely be actually a word which is used instead of a name or instead of a noun. In Old French, the expression that was used was pronom, which is very similar to the Latin form, and as I just mentioned, the purpose of the pronouns is to either refer to or to substitute a noun or a noun phrase, and the noun phrase being noun with all the words that are determining it additionally or modifying it additionally. Next word would be verb. Now, verb, in Old Greek, there was actually the process that the word rema, which means word, was actually made from the words eiro and the word ma. Eiro would mean say. So say the word, eiroma. When they were put together, the word which was made to actually represent the word verb became the word rema. And in Latin, the word to denote verbs was verbum. Of course, French, which was, the direct, descendant from the Latin, used the word verbe, and Middle English used the word verb. So basically more or less directly from Latin, the closest to the Latin. Of course, what is the point of verbs? The point of the verbs is to indicate some action, state, or an event. Now, next one is adverb. As the name itself, even in English, says, it has something to do with verbs. It is made from the ancient Greek or Old Greek word epirema, which means that the prefix epi was added to the just mentioned word rema. Epi means on. So when you put something on verb. And the Latin expression was adverbium, which was basically the coin of two different words, ad and verbium or verbum, which means that it is something which went with or went to verb. In Old French, the expression used was verbe, and basically the function of the adverbs, as the name suggests, is to modify verbs, sometimes adjectives and some other adverbs, but primarily verbs. So they stand with verbs. And the last expression, when we're talking about the parts of speech, which I will be using normally as an expression in our future journey, is the word preposition. Preposition originates from the ancient Greek word prothesis, which means a setting before. In Latin, the expressions which were used were either prepositio or prepositionem, which were the coins from the prefix pre, which means before, and the verb ponere, which means to put. So put something before. In French, Old French, the expression was preposition, and in Middle English, there were two different words which were being used. The one is preposition, and the other one was basically very similar to it, preposition. So it's either preposition or preposition. Just the place of the stress in the word is a bit different, and there is a difference in writing of one word. Of course, the function of the prepositions is to connect either a noun or a pronoun with some other words in the sentence, and usually in an adverbial or adjectival sense. So it either has some sort of adjectival purpose or a purpose of some adverb or adverbial phrase. So that is the point, basically the point of prepositions. And now what is left is to just quickly go through the additional 4 terms that I will be using out of the, that professional word toolbox. One of them is infinitive or full infinitive, but I prefer to just call it infinitive. It originates from the Latin word infinitivus, which means basically unlimited or indefinite. And it is used to mark the neutral or unchanged form of verb, just to basically denote which action or state or event we're talking about. That one is always preceded with a particle to, so it always has a particle to and doesn't have any verb tense specific usage, so it's basically just used to name a certain action or state. Out of the infinitive or full infinitive, we actually get infinitive base or bare infinitive. As the name says, bare infinitive, naked or stripped infinitive. It is basically the infinitive which has that particle to removed. So it's just the verb without the particle to, and that one is used mostly as a base for inflections, if necessary, for forming certain verb tenses or verb forms. Next one is the word participle. It is from the Greek word metoke and the Latin word participium, which the Latin word participium originates from the words pars, which is part, and capere, which means to take. So pars capere, participium, basically participere, or participare, which it means to take part in something. Now, the participles are words which are derived from verbs, and they are used with characteristics and functions of both verbs and adjectives. Now, what is the main way to basically differentiate when they're used as verbs, when they're used with adjectives? Well, when participles are used with as verbs, as verbal structures, they can never have an independent usage in in the sentence, they always have to be connected to some other verb. It's usually some auxiliary or help verb, but they always have to be connected in a certain way to some additional verbal form. When we're talking about participles being used as adjectives, as basically modifiers or words that describe something, they can have their independent usage in the sentence, but independent in a way that they're not connected to some other verbal form mostly, but used to describe some other noun, or to describe a noun or some noun phrase. And gerund, as the last thing that I'm going to mention today, which originates from the Latin word gerundium or gerundus, which basically has the meaning which is to be carried out. And gerunds are, in English, as we can say it in the shortest form, they are verbal nouns. So those are nouns made from a verb by adding a certain suffix or inflection to a verb to describe usually performance of some activity. And since it is a verbal noun, it will always be used independently in a sentence, and it will have the function of either subject or the object, and it can be determined or additionally modified with all of the other parts of speech which are actually used to modify a noun. And of course, more on that, more on all of that, you will be able to see in the following videos on the Lingomaniac Lectures part of the channel. So I hope that this was, at least clarifying a bit, or useful, or just plainly entertaining. For more, feel free to stick around and enjoy the rest of the linguistic journey, either on YouTube, soon enough on Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. See you. So if you enjoy, and if you think that you might enjoy the future content, please feel free to join me in this linguistic journey. Stick around, because we will not be dealing just with English, but also with some additional languages. So if you want to become a true lingomaniac and nerd a bit, or just simply expand your linguistic views, see you next time.